My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
The sound of praise for your Sunday morning.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Introducing Reverend A.R. Bernard of the Christian Cultural Center.
Was the son of a preacher man.
And Rabbi Joseph Patterson of Religion on the Line.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Now, on Talk Radio 77 WABC, here's the Rev and the Rabbi, where faith matters.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Patterson.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, you and I had the privilege of meeting the Nutra family. Ronaine and Orna, the parents of Omer. Mm-hmm. I was with them this past week during the Shiva, and Father turned to me, and he said, Rabbi, you know that we did everything we could to bring our son home, as well as the other hostages. And I looked at him, both of us were in tears. He said, the world knows what you did.
Yeah.
Because they were everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. They got out. They pushed the message. There's a wonderful passage in the book of Romans in our Testament. And it says that there are times when you hope against hope. And I thought that was an interesting phrase, where you hope against hope, that you become, in a place of battle with doubt, fear of the possible reality, but you hold on to the other possibility that things will have the outcome that you're expecting, that you desire. And I've watched them. I mean, they were in tears. We prayed with them. We walked with them, and they believed that their son was alive and that he would come home.
One of the things that brought them some comfort was knowing they weren't alone.
Yeah.
That a community comprised of people of different faiths. Matter of fact, they mentioned you. They mentioned the cardinal. They spoke of how it was uplifting that people of other traditions cared about them. Sometimes you live in a world where you're with your own.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that much, contact with others. And to see people coming there who had no relationship with the Nutras, but knew about them, was the lines to get in for the Shiva were extraordinary. People of all different ages. And people, you could see the different backgrounds coming in. They just wanted to say, we are with you. Now, the message of the Nutra family is the following. We didn't bring our son home, but there are other hostages there. And we, of all faiths, have to do everything we can to see that they are released and returned, which means we have to speak out, keep them in our prayers, mention, the fact that there are hostages. I know in my office I have pictures of hostages. So just know that your relationship with them and the cardinals and so many others really brought them comfort.
It speaks to the power of hope, because they knew all along that there was a possibility that they had lost their son. There is that possibility that he would not come home alive. So to meet that possibility and then turn it into something positive, now making him a symbol of others who may be alive, who can now continue in that hope. I think that's powerful.
What I wish I would see, and I'm not going to see it, is the students of the universities who are so ready and able to march for terrorist organizations, to march for the Nutra family and all of the hostages. That would be a meaningful moment. But I'll I'll hold on to that hope, but as I say, I'm optimistic against my better judgment. I don't think it's going to happen.
And I think that's the tension between the ideal and the reality. Hope presents the ideal to us. And, as faith leaders, as individuals who hold to a faith tradition, hope springs eternal with us. We become essentially prisoners of hope, even though we live with the reality and the history to prove the reality that it often turns out opposite to what we're hoping
there's
for.
an interesting Jewish law. If I'm walking on the beach and I have a ring on my finger and suddenly it falls into the sand, at which point can someone else claim it? Come along and say, finders keepers. No longer is mine. And Jewish law says the following: as long as you don't give up hope of finding it, it belongs to you, no matter who else comes along. As long as you say, I know I'm going to find that ring, it's still yours. The minute you say, no one, is going to return it, it's not mine anymore, you've lost the ring.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So,
that is very
So we
interesting.
all cling to hope, but the Nutra family embodied that undying spirit. And let's keep Omer in our hearts, but also with our hands and our voices. Let's write those letters. Let's, make those statements. Bring the hostages home.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, it speaks to who we are as human beings, that we all count, regardless of our earthly identities. Yeah. There is this transcendent identity that we all share in the image of God. That is our worth. That is our value. That is foundational to our Christian social ethic, and I'm sure is foundational to your Jewish tradition.
And if you look at the backgrounds of the hostages, there are Jews, there are Muslims, and there are Christians there. Mm-hmm. So this is not just a Jewish issue. And by the way, if it were a hostage of another faith, we would still have to speak. This is, I think sometimes people feel, well, because it's your member of your community, that's why you're speaking out. So, no.
Well, we've spoken up for each other.
Yeah.
We've stood for each other in situations.
Remember the anti-hate marches where we walked by a synagogue, a church, a mosque, and we said, all of us are together and no one has the right to do something to hurt any one of us. And I've mentioned this many times. We live in a city with all of the problems we have. We should be proud of this interfaith network that we've established over the years, where we brought more people to the table, and there's a commitment to stand in solidarity for one another and with one another.
Do you think we're going to see that? I mean, here we've got a new president coming in. I was watching when President Trump, re-elected President Trump, was sitting with President Joe Biden, and he said, elections can be tough, but here we are. It's time to move forward, essentially. Is that real, do you think?
Well, you just mentioned hope,
judgment,
right? Look, I think we have a responsibility to set an example. I think faith leaders have to use the pulpits to really demand that we find some good in one another. We stop tearing each other apart. I mean, the language that was used in the election was shameful, right? Everybody was the worst. Everybody was, an extremist. Everybody was going to bring the end of democracy.
But is that where we allow winning to take control of us? And that winning becomes more important than our humanity, than our civility?
Well, shame on us if, in order to win the vote of the public, you have to destroy the other person as much as you can. Yeah. I mean, there should be some rejection of that kind of mentality. We have two people coming on the air today, and they are different. They belong to two separate political parties, and yet they share a closeness, a respect for one another. I'm talking about Congressman Peter King and Governor David Patterson. And even though they're former, in a sense, they're still very relevant. You see them appearing on various programs. You see people want to hear what they have to say. Now, why is that? Why are they still popular? Remember Ed Koch had the privilege.
The illustrious Ed Koch.
I had the privilege of the last few years of his life having lunch with him once a month. He would walk into the restaurant. Oh, my God. Mayor, we love you. We miss you. We want to hear you. And he was relevant throughout his life. And I think the same thing is true with these two guests. People want to hear what they have to say, and they want to hear what they have to say together.
Yeah, and this will be the first time we're having them together on the show. Of course, the governor, Democrat, and Congressman Peter King, Republican. So we're looking forward to the conversation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back for more of the Rev and the Rabbi.
Where faith matters. The Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Patterson.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, do you know who we have on the line today? Two formers. A former congressperson, a former governor, which means they're unemployed right now. But, they're talking about Congressman Peter King, America's congressman. Former Governor David.
How are you guys doing?
Great. Former Governor David Patterson. Sounds like in this corner we got in this corner we got two. I got to tell you, before the congressman starts talking about his heroism in Israel, Governor Patterson and I traveled with him, missiles flying overhead, and I got to commend both of them. Came to a dangerous time, and the congressman who always complains he's got a bad leg, a bad knee. I never saw anyone run so fast. Into the shelter. And he left the governor and me out there. Right, Governor?
Yes, it was like watching Bob Hayes. I'm glad everyone's old enough to remember his name.
Congressman, I know that was planned in advance. You had already told them what you were going to do, so I'm on your side. Congressman, absolutely.
Anyway, I must tell you this. Here there are two people who come from different parties and brought a lot of love to the people of Israel during a difficult time. There have been many difficult times, but when they saw the Republican and Democrat coming together and not just visiting, but spending time talking to people, and a lot of people knew them. They're beloved in the state of Israel. I don't know about the state of New York, but in Israel, they were beloved, and I just want to commend you both for being there during a difficult time. So here we have, again, people from two different parties. You don't see this anymore. When's the last time you saw a Republican and Democrat working together on something meaningful? Does that ever happen?
It used to happen a lot more often. You just here in New York, go back to the days of Al D'Amato and Pat Moynihan. Disagreed on a lot of issues, but always worked together. It was common, even Governor Carey and Republicans, when you agreed on an issue to appear, try to work things out. Now, even if you agree with someone and you get caught in a photo with them, people in your party think you're a traitor. If you're Republican, you're a rhino. If you're a Democrat, you're just a traitor to your party. So it's unfortunate. I mean, you can't overcome it. Don't get me wrong, but it's more difficult than it used to be.
Well, I didn't know they have a rhino and they have a dino now.
Governor, when you worked with Republicans, weren't you? When you were governor?
Well, when I became governor, the Republican majority leader of the Senate was Joe Bruno, and I had been at a different time minority leader under him, and I did a lot of things that I think he always appreciated to try to keep us on the same page and, not having, petty arguments and that kind of thing. But when I became governor, he really, really helped me. And I just never forgot it. The only thing he did that I thought was a little interesting was July 4th weekend. He said, "What are you doing for July 4th?" I said, this is my first weekend, as governor, a holiday weekend. All my family's coming. And he said, "Well, bring them over to my house." I said, "Why do you want me to do that?" He says, "Because I have two brothers who haven't spoken to each other in 20 years, but they both agreed to come if you will take pictures with them."
Reconciliation, that works. But
we probably had the most even number of Republicans and Democrats at one event in the state's history.
But isn't that unique to New York? Aren't we, or should I say we tend to be more collaborative? We engage in partnerships and working together. Is that something that's unique to New York politics?
Well, I can speak for Congress. the congressional delegation in New York, not so much in recent years, but certainly for the first 20 years or so that I was there. I know you have guys like Charlie Rangel, a lot of credit for this, Ben Gilman. Mm-hmm. We used to meet weekly, maybe get bi-weekly, the entire New York delegation, finding areas we could agree on so we could be a united force. Because the rest of the country, I mean, the rule of thumb is Democrats don't worry about New York because they take it for granted. Republicans don't care about New York because they feel they can't win it anyway. So it's important that those of us in the state and both parties stick together. In California, I understand they never met. The two parties had no contact at all. But in New York, we, again, Ben Gilman and Charlie, I give them most of the credit. They would assemble everybody. And I would say 90% of the members of Congress would appear for all these lunches and dinners, and we worked an awful lot out.
Yeah. Now, today in the Assembly of the Senate, if a Democrat introduces a bill, will Republicans vote for it?
Well, the Democrats have almost veto-proof majorities. I think they actually don't have the veto-proof majority anymore. But for the last few years, it didn't matter what the Republicans did, the bills would pass. And even though I'm a Democrat and a lot of those bills I supported, just the idea that there was that wide a margin was difficult. We were in the minority. We had 24 members and Republicans had 38 when I became the minority leader. And we were able to make up the difference. And maybe the pendulum is now swinging back the other way because in the last election, I'm pretty sure that in the Senate, the veto-proof majority isn't there anymore.
I think you guys are down by one vote as far as the veto-proof. That's what I've been told, yeah.
So let me stir the pot, guys, because to have the two of you together on the show like this is just an opportunity. Post-election, the world didn't collapse. It wasn't the end of the world. We're still here. President Trump won by a very decisive margin in terms of both the popular vote and the Electoral College. And here we are, the next 4 years. And we've got to make our adjustments and whatnot. What's your commentary on the direction of the nation now? Because the nation has spoken. The nation has spoken. Regardless of disappointments or celebration, the nation has spoken in a very strong and definitive way.
Well, something has come up, Reverend, a few times. The elected officials in California saying that they're going to keep all of the sanctuary areas the way they are, almost daring the federal government to come in. Some mayor in Colorado dared them to come in. And I hearken back to the days of George Wallace standing in front of schools saying that they won't be desegregated. Now, the elected officials of today and George Wallace wouldn't have the same point of view, clearly. But they do share the same ignorance of what our country is really about and what sets us apart, or at least has set us apart for all these years from the rest of the world, that the majority will rule, the people who are put in office can exercise power under the Constitution to whatever limit it is. And the fact that anyone's even getting up and saying this right now is just hurting the whole idea that maybe after an election we could all get together and work together. Now, people are threatening other government agencies and even the president who don't have the slightest bit of legal right to do that.
Do you think people want compromise? You always represent your constituents. Do you think they want it or they want combat?
Congressman?
Yeah, I would say that, unfortunately, the bases of both parties somehow want combat. They want confrontation. But I also believe that, and I'm calling on President Trump, if he could do this, find a way to find some common ground. And as David said, it's wrong for these mayors and governors to say basically they're going to defy the federal government over something that is clearly a federal prerogative and a federal issue. I think it's important for Republicans, if that does happen, not to overplay their hand, but to somehow do it, carry out the orders or carry out the policy in a way that shows a certain degree of concern. I'm not saying we have to have a feel-good policy, but don't exacerbate what's already a bad situation. be firm, be forceful if you have to be, but don't make it any worse than you have to. And that's one way to bring people around. But we're at the stage right now. Listen, I mean, I would say in fairness, I had Republicans say if Donald Trump loses, I'm leaving the country. Then you see Democrats saying that they are going to leave the country. And to me, the country is, the fact that we're so closely divided means no one should have a veto power over the other. Mm-hmm. But this was a clear-cut election. People had seen President Trump for 4 years. He lost. He's back again. So they know what they voted for.
Right.
And as much as many Democrats maybe totally despise that, that's the reality. And I think both sides should realize how the other feels when they lose and when they win. If you have a hard-fought election like this and it's a clear winner, I think it's everyone's obligation to try to work with that person. And certainly don't provoke needless confrontation.
From your perspectives, why do you think the Democrats lost? Governor and Congressman?
I thought that one of the major issues that caused the Democrats to lose was 2 straight months of commercials put out by President-elect Trump now regarding the issues involving transgendered people. And whatever you think about the issue or don't, it was done in a way that was almost challenging the Democrats to get into that discussion. And not one dime was spent by the Democratic Party trying to clear the record from what the Republicans were campaigning against.
Yeah, I would say one of the reasons is the Democrats gave the impression that they were separate from the average person. That, for instance, if you're against the illegal immigration coming to New York, rather than give an explanation of why the Democrats take the stand they did or why they would somehow try to justify their stand, they basically say you're a racist or you're a bigot or anti-immigrant. And same when you're at the transgender issue. I mean, obviously, if something like that is in your own family, it could be a tragic psychological circumstance. But rather than try to discuss it, they passed it off. They ignored the issue. They figured only a few bigots were concerned about this issue, not knowing how that did affect the average person's concept of what a family unit should be or the difference between men and women, boys and girls. And then you would see, like in the Olympics, where a woman was knocked cold by a transgender person fighting as a woman. You see girls in volleyball getting hurt. This should have been, at the very least, discussed, not just ignored as some bigoted issue. So they gave the people, and again, the independent voters, the hardcore Republicans are going to vote for Trump no matter what. I say the independent, middle-income voters saw this as Democrats rejecting what they consider to be traditional values and standards and not even trying to offer an explanation.
It depends on who you ask a question like this, and there's not one answer to this as to why one lost and the other won. I think that, this is going to be studied in educational institutions in years to come because of the kind of election it was. But I'd like to just reflect on history. That we say history repeats itself, but does it? I think people do. We repeat ourselves. And when we look back to the 1920s, there was the Red Scare. There was the pandemic with the flu pandemic, right? There were the race riots that were happening because of the migration of African Americans to the North and concern about jobs and all of that. There was the 1924 Immigration Act, which was really towards Eastern Europeans who were coming into the country, and with the ban on Asians. There was the tariffs that were placed, that created a situation overseas because the reaction to those tariffs were tariffs placed on exports. Are we, and of course this led up to the Great Depression, because this was 10 years of a conservative shift, a radical conservative shift that led to certain things that played out in the New Deal. Are we revisiting history 100 years later, gentlemen?
Well, I don't think that the Trump policy is going to lead to a depression. He wasn't over for 4 years, and we had a very strong economy until COVID came along. So I think that I think he's going to use tariffs primarily as a bargaining point, as leverage against countries to shake them up. For instance, with Mexico, the fact is they basically are doing very little to secure their border. Canada is does a lot more than Mexico, but not as much as they used to. So I think the tariffs are being used for that purpose. We'll see. I think he's going to have some very solid people in his administration. The Treasury Secretary, who I'm not familiar with, I understand he's seems to be very well respected and regarded. So I don't see it going in that direction. And I think also, there was a blindness against legal immigration in the 1920s. Now we're talking about a situation where I think it's no exaggeration to say that New York City, certainly Manhattan, was in many ways overwhelmed by the number of illegal immigrants coming in, occupying hotels, being on the streets, and also taking some jobs away from people, but just creating a very unsettled attitude. New York, if any city's been welcome to immigrants, certainly in the last 100 years, it's been New York City. So
right.
Yeah.
And I think that we have so much built into our market systems globally, but it doesn't take away from the possibility that we can strain things by taking certain actions. Governor, your response?
So clearly, all 50 states' voting patterns moved to the right in this last election. All 50. In New York City, President Trump got 30% of the vote. Now, Kamala Harris got 67% of the vote. That was a clear margin. But what was noticed was that Trump got 25% more voters in 2024 than he got in 2020. So the public is sending government a message, and they're sending it everywhere. It isn't really about the 7 states that, could make the difference or, these other issues. It really was a mass exit from certain types of policies to more defensive policies. Why are you bringing immigrants into my neighborhood? Why are you raising my taxes? Why am I not getting the benefits that I would assume I would ordinarily get? And I think that it's going to be a challenge to try and still fight for some very necessary pieces of legislation or changes that could be made that would help more people have a good quality of life. But it's going to have to be done in a different way. And I think before one of you said, I'm not sure which one it was, said that there was a feeling among the Democrats that, we're superior. We won't have to worry about anything. If you say anything against what we say, we're going to call you these different names. That's going to have to go away right now.
Do you think
no one's listening?
Do you think there's a resentment against what was seen as elitism to have celebrities come forward and talk about inflation? Do you think that had an impact? Also, people are tired of that. They don't want to be lectured to by people who have made it and, telling them how troubling this economy is. Well,
Rabbi, when there were a number of well-known people that, we knew who got involved in politics, were close friends of the Kennedy family, were close friends of the Nixon family. And they were always out, campaigning for their friends, in a sense. What now was this attempt to just get people who are famous for whatever reason and get them to say things that half the time when they said them, you didn't even understand it because they hadn't researched the issue that well. Yeah. So I thought that was a real mistake. The celebrity is not going to win a campaign for you.
Right. Congressman?
Okay.
Also, I think the Democrats showed themselves more open to being vulnerable to celebrities. I mean, the fact that George Clooney had a role in bringing Joe Biden down. I mean, he got so much coverage at that time because he wrote an op-ed basically saying that Biden should not run, even though he had already basically gotten the Democratic nomination. As a practical matter, the Democrats kept every other candidate off the ballot, giving Biden a free pass to the nomination. And then at the end, suddenly you have people behind the scenes, George Clooney being one, and also Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama coming in. And in effect, I don't know exactly how it was done, but it was a pretty good political execution, getting Biden off and bringing in Kamala Harris, who had never been on the ballot at all in this year. And that I think left a wrong impression for people that was done.
Peter,
and that,
Peter, I have to say this. God forbid if President Trump had been severely injured in either one of those assassination attempts, to the point that he realized that he couldn't run for president, I think the leadership in the Republican Party would have come together. They wouldn't have had a primary at their convention, which they were suggesting that us Democrats do.
Right.
They wished we'd had a primary at the convention so they could laugh at us, but we didn't do it. And we consolidated around the vice president. And there was a little period, particularly after the first debate with Trump, that it looked like the vice president had a very good chance to get elected. So I don't think it was that the Democrats didn't really demonstrate democracy. It was decisions that were made in an emergency by the leadership.
Yes, we're going to be back with more.
We've got to take a break.
Congressman Peter King and Governor David.
Yeah, we're actually taking a break.
Wait a minute,
Rabbi, give us a break,
I'm just
Rabbi.
getting warmed up here.
You got a break here.
Jeez.
So stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi Sunday morning here on 77 WABC. We'll be right back.
Reverend A.R. Bernard, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, the Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC and the all-new WABCRadio.com.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Patterson.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we are speaking with former Congressman Peter King, who's known as America's Congressman, and former Governor David Patterson, known as America's Governor.
America's Governor. And gentlemen, I'd like to, while the conversation is at this level, ask you about the isolationist policies. Again, going back to the 1920s and, history or people repeating themselves, because when enacted in those days, it created a vacuum on the international stage in Europe and allowed for nationalism and totalitarian leaders to emerge. Should we be concerned about taking on that posture in relationship to the international landscape?
I think it depends on how Donald Trump implements isolationism. Now, during his 4 years as president, Putin made absolutely no inroads. He didn't go against Ukraine or Georgia. China did not move on Taiwan, and certainly Hezbollah and Iran made no moves against Israel. So it depends on how it's employed. For instance, he did bring about the Abraham Accords, which every president had been trying to do something like that for decades. Now, I don't always agree with the way he talks about us not getting involved here or there. The fact is, when push came to shove, America did what it had to do over those 4 years. So I think a lot of what he does is bargaining, but I do believe America has a role to play. I think he realizes that. How it's implemented, we're going to see. Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State, is certainly not a traditionalist, a isolationist in the 1920s sense. And also, you're going to have people like General Kellogg, who is a very strong, fighter of having a strong American defense. Also, going back to one thing, not to divert for a second, with Kamala Harris, I can tell you, Republicans in tight races, when she became the nominee, they dropped off 2 or 3 points. She was actually a positive force that first week or two. And what happened after that, we can debate. But she was actually looked upon as a fresh face. And I know several Republicans in close races, their polling numbers took a hit when she became the candidate.
To your point there, do you think it's because the Republican Party basically had a strategy for Biden and not a Kamala Harris?
Oh, yeah. The point I was making is there was no reaction against her that I saw because she was a woman of color. Now, I'm not a person of color, and so I can't say for sure, but I did not detect it like in the campaigns I was involved in. I didn't see that being an issue on either side. But again, David may have a better read on that.
Yeah, Governor?
I just thought that when Barack Obama in 2008 ran, and at that point, no black man or woman had ever become president, that he had a tone that was far more encouraging and a wider sense of reaching out. I mean, I went to a Obama campaign meeting once, and they were talking about how to win North Dakota. I almost fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. But then I realized the reason they were talking about trying to win North Dakota is because they were trying to get people to see it's not just the black vote. It's not just the East Coast. It's not just the major states. We can win in other places. And they went out and did it. To me, I never heard the promise of America from her. I never heard her even appearing to be reaching out that much. Or sometimes she'd say something about being a woman and everybody would cheer, but I don't know if that brought her any votes.
I think one of the things the election taught us is no one will ever take any group for granted, right? Given the shifts that took place, unexpected, groups voting for Trump instead of the usual Democratic, putting the X there or whatever, that's going to change. That's going to change the thinking, how we go forward. Let me ask you this. I know that the Rev and I would pass a background check, or at least I would.
Hey, watch it.
So when you have people running for office, obviously there's got to be, that kind of background check. How far back do you think they should go?
Well, I think some cases are extreme. Like, for instance...
by the way, Congressman, off the air, you said 2 weeks, no more than that.
No, I mean, a Supreme Court judge nominee to go back to something that may or may not have happened in high school and didn't lead to anything anyway. To me, that was certainly going to, much too far. And anyone's record, if you're going to find somebody who was maybe drunk one night or someone who was having an affair sometime, to me, that is not really relevant unless it shows, let's say, up in their conduct in the last 5 or 10 years. Of course, it must be something serious, like a violent assault or murder or rape or something. But as far as just getting, acting crazy one night or 2 nights or something, 10, 15 years ago, that should be put in, very much in perspective as, what their overall record is. None of us, except for David Patterson, is perfect.
And now we know from perfection. Go ahead, Governor Patterson, please weigh in.
Well, I think the congressman really hit the nail on the head. What you want to distinguish is a period perhaps in someone's life where things weren't going well for them and they did a number of things that they now regret. In addition, they have to be strong enough to stand up and answer for what they did. And remember, when I got elected, there were some issues about my past, and I stood up and addressed all of them. And then David Letterman did a skit saying, this guy admits to everything. And they had this actor come on and say all these different things he had done. But, this being a religious show, the ability to atone for one's actions is really what ignites the whole idea of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And that's what basically all the religions are about. It's about the sacrifice and also the forgiveness. And I know one particular elected official. I've known him a long time. I have never heard him say once that he did anything wrong. And I think it's worked very much against this individual. And so what I'm saying is it isn't just the background check. It's how the person reacts to it. Or any disclosures they want to make even before.
Curtis never said he did anything wrong.
He let the cat out the bag. But gentlemen, in 2022, there was a big article around the idea of what is called offense archaeology. Mm-hmm. And essentially it's digging up dirt on people, especially political candidates, unearthing old comments, made by public figures. And the intent is to incite outrage, or economic consequences against them. So it's this whole new, category called offense archaeology. And they sell the information to political parties, to opposition, and that's kind of where we are as a society.
Sometimes you hire someone who's vicious because if he's on the other side, he's going to go after you. And that's
exactly. So you take them away from the other side.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, it was started by a leftist. It started on the left.
There are just a few minutes left. A reporter called me and asked, what do you think about this idea of going to let's say a Thanksgiving dinner, a Christmas Hanukkah event, but don't talk politics? Don't, because you're going to destroy the relationship. And I said it's interesting because when God created the world, he created the human family first. The laws came later. And maybe there's a hierarchy there and saying family matters most of all. And we always tell people, you protect your family. I mean, is this the stage that we're going to accept as being the norm, that you can't talk politics anymore because it's going to sever or rupture? I know some grandparents who were denied access to their grandchildren for a few weeks because they had voted a certain way.
Yeah.
Well, roll out
the
presses, gentlemen. I was the only person at my Thanksgiving dinner who voted for Harris. I was the only one. So I didn't start any fights because I knew I would get beat up. There were a lot of more people there. But seriously, there has to be a point where you can have and by the way, we did have political conversations at the dinner, but you just have to learn to respect other people's point of view, or sometimes to explain your point of view in a way that you think even someone who disagrees with you will understand it.
Congressman?
Yeah, I think in today's world, you should state your political view with the understanding, as you're saying it, though, that others are probably going to disagree with you or may disagree with you. Not saying this is from the Talmud or from a papal encyclical that you have to believe this. Just say, listen, I understand how people feel. I really think we should do this. I think Trump is right on that. I think Biden was right on this. And try to find some way to describe it in a way that you're looking for a discussion, not argumentative like, I believe this. If you don't, you're a fool or a Nazi or a fascist or whatever. So but it does get tough. I mean, fortunately, my family, we sort of understand each other, but I've had some, let's say, right outside the immediate family circle. It's hard to talk. Yeah. And to me, it's dinner parties.
Isn't that what makes progress, gentlemen? The fact that we can have difference of opinion and challenge each other.
And still retain a relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was telling the reporter, maybe you should offer a prayer just before we begin the meal. You know, that we are different. Let's remember we're also the same.
Yeah.
Like the ground rules for this for the table.
Gentlemen, it's been a wonderful conversation with the two of you. Have we ever had this before, where we had Peter King and Governor Patterson?
Well, because Patterson said he wouldn't appear with Peter King.
Because of things you said.
Yeah, because they don't like each other. This has all been a put on.
This is all after the background check. They made these decisions. Okay.
Let me tell you something. To be in the presence of these two it's inspiring. It's like there's hope for the future. We can get people to talk civilly to one another, seriously, and not in any way destroy the relationship. Shimon Peres was the prime minister of Israel years ago, and he said, a friend is a friend, a disagreement is a disagreement, and learn to keep them separate from one another.
Let me just say, one of the reasons why David Patterson is such a good guy is he found out that he's part Irish.
He's part Jewish also, he told me.
It's 23andMe. Okay.
You know, when he meets a Jew, he says, I'm part Jewish. He meets an Irishman, I'm part Irish. That's why he endears himself to everyone.
I see.
You mean we're all mixed up?
Yeah,
huh? We're all mixed up.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you so much. It's really been,
thank
privilege.
all of you. It was great.
All right.
Thank you.
This was inspiring for me. Now I can wake up.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thank you. Great.
And stay tuned for more. We'll be right back with the Rev and the Rabbi.
Reverend A.R. Bernard, Rabbi Joseph Pataznik, the Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC and the all-new WABCRadio.com.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Pataznik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
You know, Reverend, we Jews are accustomed to arguing. It's part of our tradition. The Talmud has many arguments. Contemporaries of Jesus, Hillel, and Shammai would have, 310 arguments, it is said. And one, Hillel would say to Shammai, present your case first. You present your statement. I'll respond to it. But it showed respect for the other. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why we have disintegrated or descended into this place where you simply can't have a conversation and not scream at the other person or threaten the other person. It's not where it should be.
You know, there's a wonderful passage in the Proverbs, and it speaks of iron sharpening iron. Mm-hmm. And that is so true. We become better by the debate. We become better by challenging each other's thoughts and ideas and conclusions, and that's part of critical thinking. You question first to understand exactly what we're talking about, and if we're on the same page, exactly what took place or what was said. Then we analyze. We take a look at it and put some perspective to it. And after we analyze, then we reflect. But then the last part of that is debating our own conclusions. And that's important, even before we begin to talk to someone else, so that we're open to conversation, open to dialogue.
You know, I once mentioned to you that there's a Jewish tradition that when you walk into a room, there's a number of people that you recite a blessing. Thank you, God, for creating people whose faces are different from one another and whose minds are different from one another. And I just wish we would appreciate difference. If we all were the same, if we agreed on everything, it would be a pretty boring moment for us, right?
Extremely boring.
Yeah. And when you threaten to distance yourself from someone because that person disagrees with you, to me, it shows a weakness in your argument.
Absolutely, Rabbi. Right? Absolutely. One of the rules for debating is knowing your opponent's position even better than you know your own, because that's what prepares you to have that debate, have that conversation. I have been strengthened and I have grown in conversation with people who disagree with me, because it allows me to understand their perspective and reevaluate my own. You know, and do I dig deeper and get stronger in my own position? Or do I say, well, you know what? I may need to make some adjustments here along the way.
You know, when you're in law school, one of the things they teach you is argue the majority opinion. Now that you've done that, argue the minority opinion.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Argue both sides.
Yeah.
And it is so disheartening. So people have already destroyed. And by the way, social media has contributed. You know,
the echo chambers, yeah.
Yeah, I always mention these people who sit behind computers and send out these emails thinking that people read them. But the things they say, there's no accountability because they can. And I think you got to be somewhat discriminating in what you read and who you listen to. But if you really can share a meaningful relationship and disagree, you value that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you know, I use the scenario where you have on one block in the city, you have Kentucky Fried Chicken, Popeyes, Burger King, Taco Bell, and McDonald's. And then all of them, the owners, go out to eat at a steakhouse together.
You didn't mention one kosher place in that whole.
Hey, well, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
But a great conversation with two incredible individuals, and I love having them on a program because they bring perspective, you know, and experience to it. So we hope you've enjoyed our conversation today with Governor David Patterson and Congressman Peter King, and of course, the dynamic duo, the Rev
and the Rabbi.
We'll be back next time. God bless.
Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better. With services close to all New York and New Jersey cemeteries, Eden Memorial Chapels offer fair and balanced pricing and can provide easy transfer of you and your loved ones to Israel. While you're grieving, they're here to take care of all the details so that you deal with less bureaucracy and have more peace of mind. Go to EdenMemorial.com. That's EdenMemorial.com.